The rain had started before the sun went down. A slow soaking kind that turned the dirt, rode into a ribbon of mud and made the lantern light, shimmer like a trembling heart. And it was in that rain that Clara Whitmore stepped down from the mail wagon with a single carpet bag in her hand and a future that suddenly felt far heavier than it had in all her letters. She had imagined this moment 100 times while writing neatly folded pages back. East imagined a man standing straight and expectant. Imagined warmth, perhaps awkward kindness, maybe even hope. Instead, she saw a ranch house dark against the storm, a long porch slick with rain, and a man who did not smile when he saw her, only watched with a guarded, measuring look that made her feel as though she were something the storm had blown in by mistake. Jonah Hale was broader than she'd imagined, his face worn by sun and loss rather than age, his eyes sharp but tired, like a man who slept lightly even in peace. Between them stood his little boy, Eli, barefoot despite the cold rain, clinging to his father's leg and staring at Clara as if she were a stranger from a story he wasn't sure he believed. Clara swallowed her fear, smoothed her damp dress and said his name softly, the way she had practiced. But Jonah only nodded once, curt, and told the driver that he could leave. The wagon rolled away, the sound of wheels fading, and with it Clara's last easy escape. Jonah turned toward the house, ushering Eli inside without inviting Clara to follow. And it was only when she stood there in the rain, uncertain and shaking, that he seemed to realize she hadn't moved. "You should have known," he said, not unkindly but firmly. "This isn't some storybook place." Clara, soaked and exhausted, lifted her chin and answered with the dignity that had carried her through worse than this. "I can sleep in the barn," she said, her voice barely louder than the rain, not as a plea but as an offering of peace. Jonah stiffened, the words landing wrong, stirring something sharp in his chest. And without another word, he stepped inside and closed the door. The sound final, the lock clicking like a verdict. Clara stood there, stunned, staring at the closed door, at the glow of lamplight behind curtained windows, and then she turned slowly toward the barn, its dark shape looming through the rain. She told herself she would not cry, not yet, because she had not crossed half a country to break at the first cruelty. But as she walked, her boots sinking into mud, the weight of loneliness pressed so hard she could scarcely breathe. Inside the barn, the smell of hay and animals wrapped around her, not unpleasant but deeply unfamiliar. And she sank down on a bale, clutching her bag, listening to the storm drum on the roof and wondering how a life could hinge on a single locked door. She thought of the letters Jonah had written, brief and practical, never warm but not cold either, promising a home, promising safety, promising a future if not affection. She had accepted because safety mattered, because after her parents died there was little left for her back, east but charity and whispers, and because she believed that even a guarded man might learn kindness in time. As the night deepened, Clara lay awake, shivering despite the hay pulled around her, replaying Jonah's face, the way his jaw had tightened when she spoke of the barn, as if her humility offended him more than anger would have. Inside the house, Jonah sat at the table long after Eli had fallen asleep, staring at the door he had locked, telling himself he had done the right thing, that letting a stranger into his home so easily was a mistake he could not afford. He told himself that women came with expectations, with softness that would not survive this land, with questions he did not want to answer, especially not about the wife he had buried 2 winters ago. Yet every time the wind rattled the windows, he imagined Clara out there in the dark, and something uneasy twisted in his chest. He rose once, walked halfway to the door, then stopped, anger flaring at his own weakness. He had agreed to a mail-order bride for Eli's sake, for help around the ranch, for practicality, not for comfort. And if Clara expected gentleness on the first night, she had chosen the wrong man. Dawn came gray and cold, and when Jonah finally stepped outside, expecting to find the barn door open, expecting proof that she had already left, he found Clara instead, standing stiffly in the yard, hair damp, eyes shadowed but steady, holding out a tin cup of coffee she must have made herself from supplies in her bag. "Good morning," she said simply. And in that moment Jonah realized that locking the door had not broken her, but it had changed something, and he did not yet know whether that change would cost him more than he was prepared to lose. If this story has already pulled you into its storm of pride, fear, and fragile hope, remember to subscribe to the channel. because what comes next will test every locked door and guarded heart even further. The days that followed settled into a strange, brittle routine, as if the ranch itself were holding its breath, and Clara moved through it like a quiet force. Jonah could neither dismiss nor fully control. He let her sleep in the small room off the kitchen eventually, not out of apology but necessity, telling himself the barn was no place for anyone long-term. Yet he never spoke of that first night, and neither did she. Instead, Clara worked rising before dawn, learning the rhythm of the ranch with a speed that surprised Jonah and unsettled him more than incompetence would have. She cooked without complaint, cleaned without asking, tended to Eli with a patience that slowly coaxed the boy's laughter back into the house, and all the while she asked for nothing. Not warmth, not affection, not even acknowledgement beyond what was required. Jonah watched her from the edges of his daze, telling himself her competence made things easier, that this was exactly what he had arranged. Yet each time he saw her smile at Eli or hum softly while kneading bread, something inside him shifted, an old ache stirring where grief had hardened into armor. The ranch hands noticed too, the way Clara held herself with quiet dignity, the way she never spoke ill of Jonah, even when they saw his reserve border on cruelty, and whispers began to circle, not unkind but curious, about the woman who had arrived in the rain and stayed despite everything. One evening after a long day that left Jonah bone-tired and short-tempered, he came home to find Clara sitting on the porch steps, Eli asleep against her shoulder, the sunset painting them both in gold, and for a moment he saw not a stranger but a family-shaped silhouette that made his breath catch. The moment passed when Eli stirred and Jonah cleared his throat, but it left behind a question Jonah could no longer ignore. How long could he keep his heart locked without destroying what was quietly growing under his roof? The answer came sooner than he expected, carried on a crisis that stripped away pretense as surely as the storm had stripped away comfort on Clara's first night. It was late summer when a fire broke out in the far pasture, flames racing toward the barns with a hunger that turned the sky an angry red. Jonah and the hands fought it desperately, but a sudden shift in wind sent smoke rolling toward the house, and in the chaos Jonah realized Eli was nowhere in sight. Panic tore through him, sharp and absolute, and he ran, shouting his son's name, fear drowning out every other thought.